So we'll move forward. Okay. So most attendees will have engaged with us before, but I think it's good to have a brief reminder of CFIT's mandate and our progress to date. So CFIT was established to ensure that the UK can be a leader in finance and technology in order to make the UK the best place to scale a startup, driving job creation, creating better outcomes for SMEs and consumers. We announced our first coalition in April, and that first coalition was about proving the business case for open finance. Let's move on to the next slide. CFIT will deliver through a series of coalitions, which brings together the best talents from across the country. Coalitions are comprised of experts with the ability to solve for the most challenging issues within financial innovation. The coalition itself have measurable, real-world outcomes and benefits that are clearly attributable to the coalition's work. These outputs could include, for example, product platform prototypes, research papers, wireframes, draft APIs, just as samples of what the output from an actual coalition could be. So how will a coalition actually work? Well, each coalition will be different depending on the use case that it tackles. However, all the coalitions will share a core approach to operation and output. Stage gates formalizing the coalition, including research and formalizing an opportunity statement, which we've completed by announcing the coalition. Next, we move on to unlocking the potential through mobilizing the coalition, which is the phase where we're in now. And then finally, we'll be looking at actually promoting the use cases and their solutions to government and industry. So to recap, research and formalizing an opportunity statement, mobilizing through bringing on board those members and really identifying the core outputs and building on those outputs for that coalition. And then finally, bringing all that information together in a report, in a demonstration, and promoting those use cases and their solutions to government and industry at large. So I've touched on use cases, but what are they? Well, in order to enable the creation of tangible outputs that actually demonstrate the key use cases for open finance, we've split the coalition itself, open finance in this case, into multiple use cases, which will be taken forward by individual and regional working groups. These will be comprised, as I said earlier, of experts across industry, policy, and academia, as well as other relevant participants who will focus on designing a solution related to their specific use cases opportunity statement. They will also be able to pull in a resource or pull in resources from the central coalitions, coalition use cases. We go on to the next slide. We actually came to a long list of about 6 high-level use cases through a lot of research, conversations with industry and ecosystem members, some of which you would have been involved in last year as part of EY's Wavespace work and the initial EY playbook was put together. These use cases have then been put through a prioritization framework, and we've then gone out to the wider ecosystem yourselves. Many of you on this call have already helped us with this, and we asked for additional feedback through a survey which we sent out to you. Key thing about the survey is that it's very much there to provide a good steer, and it's been used to add a weighting to the research and the scoring that's already been done by us and our team in order to ensure that we're focused on the critical areas of concern for the ecosystem. But here's the key thing, that they are still actionable and deliverable. We now have 3 potential prioritized use cases, focusing on consumer credit files, access to finance for SME, and consumer financial awareness. And on the screen, you can see a bit more detail as to what those 3 specific use cases could encompass. So bear in mind, those use cases still need to be refined further, and that's what we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks. So how will a use case actually work? Well, we've tried to define use case statements, and we'll work on refining these further through our engagement with the regions through virtual 90-minute workshops. These will have been researched and refined to a point where each use case is issued with a defined, well, each working group for a use case is issued with a defined challenge statement and collateral on high-level solution ideas, such as indicative parties to be involved and the rest. During the use case development phase, please go back one slide. Self-organizing regional working groups will first work to define the solution and identify data sets needed to realize the opportunity statements. They'll then work together and pull in partner resource to build, test, and iterate on a solution which results in a tangible piece of IP that can be taken forward. As mentioned, these could be things such as UX wireframes, architectural diagrams, reports on regulation and policy changes, draft APIs, data sharing agreements, platforms, or even plugging together existing solutions that are out there and figuring out how can we enable innovation to solve these problems in that way. Post-use case, at the close of the coalition, there will be a playback show and tell for each of the use case working groups to really demonstrate their outputs in front of investors, industry members, policymakers, and academics. Fundamentally, any and all who could be involved in actually scaling the solution going forward. So just to reiterate what will be happening here, fundamentally, we've got our statements around open finance. We've identified use cases with real problem statements or opportunity statements that we believe the industry would like to see tackled in order to remove barriers. Over the course of that process, some kind of solution will be developed and created by that working group. They will leverage that to create data and outcomes or outputs, which they can then test and actually utilize to demonstrate to the industry at large that this is what happens if we come together to solve this problem. If we leverage data from this specific data set, this is the outcome that we can have either for consumers or for SMEs at large. And there will be a report that will then be published to demonstrate that and show to both government and industry that this is something that needs to be taken forward. Here's the actual solution. Let's go for it. So if we move forwards, we can talk about where we are in that process at the moment. As you can see, we've finalized our core coalition opportunity statement. We announced what that coalition was, which was open finance. We're currently in the process of researching and refining those use cases. And by the end of June and July, those use cases will be formed and selected, as will the members. And we're working very closely with our team at EY, so Sam Reed and underneath Anita Kimber, to do this piece of work. Once the coalition kicks off, we'll then begin the 6-month coalition process. So this is a fairly short coalition, but it's basically split into 3 phases. Solution and design, which will be 2 months, solution build, which will be 3 months, and solution test, which will be 1 month. So as you can see, very similar to a software development cycle, and probably not a surprise given my software development and tech and founder background. But alongside that, the idea will be that we will produce a report which will talk very much to the value and the results and the outcomes that have been created through this coalition. So if we step forwards to what a coalition actually looks like, I know this is a key question that has come up. I think the clear point here is that there are defined roles within each of these use cases, and across the coalition as a whole, that require commitments. For example, we'd like to have a use case leader for each one that drives things forward and interfaces with the coalition steerco and CFIT leadership. The other key point is that at a use case working group level, they are largely self-governing. We recommend use case working groups meeting every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on sprint lengths, in order to assess progress, identify blockers and risks, and to assess any resource needs from members of the use case, from coalition partners as progress moves forwards. The coalition steerco will really be the forum for use case working group leaders or other members as needed to go and flag progress, blockers, or resource requests. The CFIT program manager will be the one responsible for managing centralized resources, both from CFIT and from the partner. So I think the key thing here is that it's been critical for us we build in appropriate governance as we go forwards. These coalitions genuinely are self-organizing entities that will be responsible for taking these projects forward, with CFIT really ensuring that this activity takes place, convening, bringing it all together, ensuring the frameworks are there, and making sure that we maintain that momentum and that we do manage to achieve what we really set out to from the beginning, which is that we're about action and not talking. So if we step forwards and we look at our resourcing model, this is really to give you a sense of the type of resources that we would really want to see within a coalition, things that we would need to see. So we'd expect each use case working group to have various resources made available to them, potentially pulled in from the coalition level or made directly available. We'd expect a number of key partners to sit across those use case working groups, providing resources across all as and when needed. And this would include things like developer support, environments, sandboxes, consultancy, project management support, for example. And these resources will need to be committed. So not side of desk, we are looking for real commitment to these projects. And we will have the CFIT program manager who will be responsible for coordinating those resource requests from across the working groups. If we move on to the next slide. And here, what we have here now is really kind of an org chart for what a use case might actually look like. Really tries to bring to life the kind of roles we'd like to see from partners. So key thing here is that differing roles will have more or less involvement depending on the phase. And we're very clear about that. As we said earlier, there are 3 key phases as we go through the life cycle of each coalition. And, for example, research and design leads and their resources are needed more at the beginning as a solution is designed, whereas tech resources will be a necessity across the build phase, which is 3 months. Some may be needed across all, such as potentially legal support at a coalition level, for example. But I think what I want to stress here is that for some resources, you will only need to dip in and out as and when necessary, but some may be needed across the entire life cycle of a coalition. And for those partners, it really is about that life cycle, coalition time frame, that time-bound period from which we'd like to see the commitment. And I do stress that that commitment is to the coalition itself, not to CFIT. So with that, we've heard a little bit about potential partners, what we've got. Charlie, I can see you've got a question. If you could please put that in the chat and we'll address it at the end of the session. I can promise you we'll get there. We've got a fair bit of time left open for Q&A, so to keep the session as interactive as possible. But if that question could be noted, we'll get to that as we go forwards. So right now, what I wanted to do is to give you all an opportunity to hear from 3 potential partners on how they're thinking of working with CFIT. Firstly, we'll have Nick Levy from IBM, followed by Adam Gagan at Revolut, and finally, James Rowe at Allen & Overy. So if we could have Nick up to speak, please. Be brilliant to hear from you about why you want to engage and what you're going to be providing as we go forwards.
Hey, Ez. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to join the session and contribute a little bit. I think CFIT seems really exciting, and IBM are really keen to participate. I think at this stage we're still learning exactly what we could contribute to the coalition and the various activities, but what I would say is there are a range of different ways that IBM potentially can get involved, and what I thought I'd do today is just share a few of those potential ways to colour the picture, and I think they link nicely as to what you've been kind of setting out already. So it could be that, IBM, we have a cloud, right? So, as part of our support for the activities going forward, we might be able to provide access to sandboxes, allow the teams to build data repositories or use those to host collaboration tooling that might be used by the team members to get work done, share files, equally to do some development activities. So again, our IBM Cloud has various development tools. Even more so, it might be that if there is the appetite to develop a proof of concept for one particular area, then it might be that some of our IBM technologies could be of use. Some of those might be our sort of classical technologies, so database technologies. They could be modeling environments where people want to create a model or potentially even create APIs on an API workbench, or even some of our emerging technologies where we've got our data and analytics tooling and AI capabilities, where again, people might want to model and scenario tests through some of the data that might be gathered. So I think that's some examples. I think also, obviously, we've got lots of different talented people across IBM who work in the financial services industry. They're already working with lots of software partners, many of whom might be on this call, but also new banks and the existing banks and other financial services participants in the market. And so we have an understanding, for example, we might be able to bring people who understand the architecture of various banking processes or financial services transactions or data structures and data formats, and be able to get involved in creating architectural blueprints or starting to define data structures and data standards. And then equally, we have kind of design resources and project management resources who might want to get involved in those sorts of activities. Finally, I'd maybe add that IBM also has a pretty strong heritage in helping in coalitions, in cooperative activities to create data structures, data formats, open standards, even working with kind of globally recognized bodies like ANSI, who help kind of almost ensure that standards, once they are documented, are then genuinely adopted by industry and kind of curated in the right way. So there's a whole spectrum of support that we could potentially bring into this. I think at the moment, our view is we need to paint the picture of what we can do, and then as we learn more about what the focus is, we can then hone down on the specific support we're willing to provide. And then maybe just one final comment, and I'll pass it back to Ez, right, is I think we're excited about this and keen to be part of this because we can see that obviously the pace of innovation and technology adoption is accelerating, but we equally know that 1 + 1 can equal a lot more than just 2 when collaboration is done in the right way. And so one of the things that I think IBM are excited about here is crossing industry barriers and getting different organizations to come together around a common purpose. And I think that's one of the things we find really interesting here. So Ez, with that, I'll pause and hand back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. Brilliant to have you supporting. Adam, be brilliant to hear something from you about how you want to get involved and why Revolut is interested in this, and the type of resource you feel you can bring to the table. Adam's raised his hand.
Perfect. Yeah, you can hear me. Sorry, just making sure I could get off mute. Apologies, my camera's not working for some reason. So Ez, yeah, thanks very much for inviting us and the great summary. I think like a lot of people on the call, we're really excited about CFIT, and we're particularly excited about the fact it's not going to be a talking shop. It's going to be a place for building things, right? Prototypes, APIs, proof of concepts. So we demonstrate how technology is going to help people. In terms of how we can add value, right? And I think a lot of others people can. I think we've been trying to think through what are the different resources we can bring to bear. And again, these are kind of ideas to share with the broader group, and then we defer to you, right, with Charlotte to figure out how you want to leverage it. So the first is to kind of think about how we can commit resources to these coalitions. So given the focus is on, again, building, prototyping, one way we've been looking at it is to say, would we, as a coalition supporter, devote a certain number of man hours to a project? And again, maybe that's prototypes, maybe that's just dev engineers, maybe that's strategy or marketing professionals, right, that we can bring in terms of how do you bring, you know, these solutions to life, but kind of use that potentially as a metric of people kind of being locked into genuinely living up to their commitment, right, to provide the resources, and giving you, Easy, and the team kind of very clear tools with which you can progress these projects, because people will have made commitment for 1,000 hours, 5,000 hours, whatever the number is that you're trying to hit for each of these coalitions to progress. So that's one thing that we're really interested to explore, kind of to scope out what do we think the build requirements would be, where are the areas and the types of roles you would like resources from, and then amongst a broader group, right, who can give what when and give some sort of flexible control. We see some upside also in terms of, obviously there's some very great support being given by Treasury, which is fantastic. There's obviously great support being given by the city. You know, engineers, dev time, these kind of things is expensive, right? And it's very, very key for companies to be able to really keep resources there. So being able to kind of articulate how much resource the industry is providing, given again that equates to X amount of money, right, or X amount of time, I think also will show that if you're a coalition partner, you're there to really deliver and drive it forward in tandem with government, in tandem with the city and others. So that was our first area of discussion, right, in terms of, you know, putting your money where your mouth is and really making it about building product and putting man hours in. So that was the first idea that we had. The second is, I think, you know, a lot of us on the call have a lot of primary data that we can share. We can also have routes to collect more of it. So, for example, doing surveys of our millions of customers around the country, doing regional surveys, breaking it down by age group, socioeconomic demographic. There's a lot of us on the retail side, right, that potentially can bring together a lot of interesting, informative primary research that no one else can actually pull together. And again, essentially CFIT being the house of that, being able to do that in a targeted way to inform how we develop these things, we think would be potentially advantageous. So that's the second area we think is potentially something we should talk about. And, you know, there's some data and GDPR and legal issues we need to manage, but we think they're manageable. And then the third element is really more broad in-kind support, right? So, you know, do you need hosting sessions for these regional sessions? Do you need, you know, places to bring these teams together to do collaboration in real life as well as just virtually? And again, people like us, you know, with large office spaces and good support across the country, I'm sure are happy to put our hands up and do so. And again, I'm sure there's a lot of other people on the call as well who'll be looking to do it too. So that's kind of where our head's at the moment, saying, you know, all the caveats on, you know, we can't commit until we know exactly what we're doing, but we think this is potentially the right approach, right? Which is, let's focus on devoting committed time and resource to CFIT to build product. Let's look at doing things no one else can do by getting data to inform and kind of corroborate why these things are impactful. And then third, you know, the in-kind benefit support is something which I think will help make it all happen. So thanks very much, Ezechi, for the invite. And again, I'm happy to hear the discussion, how it progresses.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Adam. Really appreciate the show of support and all the insights you bring to this as well. So finally, James, it'd be brilliant to hear from you. So James from Allen Overy, on how you and your organization could support CFIT and why. Is James there? Oh, he's got his hands up. Could someone enable James?
Okay, you should be able to hear me now.
I can. Fantastic.
So this is probably dress down for me. I haven't got a tie on. So I'm a lawyer. There's the confession. I think it's quite a key moment for the UK post Brexit, and all the kind of discussions going on in the public debate about how we stimulate the economy, how we increase productivity, what sectors should the government focus on. You know, how we look to help people save for the future, the role of capital markets, the role of the city, levelling up, all of that in it. And we take our role in that quite seriously. It's an exciting moment, but one that's important for what the future looks like. And we're moving from the phase from discussion into action, and there needs to be coordinated action. So from our perspective, CFIT is an entity, a valuable entity player, through which we can see actionable results through stakeholder engagement. And the government's very much involved with that. Both parties are involved in that. They're saying the same thing. The regulators are quickly getting up to speed, depending which regulator you talk about. And we're involved in that game as well. So what do we think we could contribute? Governance is an area we think we can help with at the outset. Governance around processes, but also around the output. When I mean the output, I mean what rights or what potential liabilities attach to the work that's done. People who go into a process needs to understand that their interests are being looked after. that they're not exposing themselves. So it's putting a governance framework around that and making sure everybody knows the rules of the game, and everybody feels that it's that those rules are just and obviously transparent and easily understandable. What do we bring? We are, as lawyers, regulatory specialists. That's a particular area of expertise of mine. I also have a deep bench of other specialists, whether it's regulation, whether it's IP, whether it's AI, data, consumer. There's a lot of people in the building that I sit in. We also participate in quite a few of the industry bodies in the city. So City of London, City UK, UK Finance. We deal with the regulators. So we're watching on an observer and a participant in a lot of what's going on. And all of that leads me to the conclusion or the commentary I had at the beginning that this is an important thing that's doing. We're also a house that likes to think about technology. We are the first law firm to take GPT-4 and apply it in the legal space. We call ours Harvey. We also have a hub in the building where we always sponsor at a time 6 legal tech firms, and we rotate those, but we support that. And then we have parts of our product line are now very much tech enabled, and we have a growing number of coders in the building. So for a lot of reasons, this is of great interest to us. We've committed ourselves to help up front with the governance and to assist there. And then with respect to individually how we contribute to individual initiatives, I think we need to learn a little bit more to see how those pan out. But we're very happy to help establish the framework up front.
Fantastic. James, thank you so much. It's great to have you guys on board, and really looking forward to working together. Okay, so as we move on to the next slide, you've heard a little bit from our coalition partners or those who have offered to become coalition partners. I should probably mention other organisations that have worked with us so far as well. I think I have to tell you all that for those of you who don't realise, we are backed by Treasury, so we're a private, not-for-profit industry body, but HMT put £5 million worth of seed funding into CFIT to enable all of this activity. And alongside that has been the City of London, who have been our delivery partner, who put in £500,000 of funding as well. And one of the organisations that helped us spin up was KPMG. They did some great work helping us just get off the ground. And we're working very closely with EY now as we launch this first coalition. So as you can see, there are many different ways that many different organisations are working with us. And we work very closely with Innovate Finance, with the various regional bodies such as fintech Scotland, fintech North, fintech Wales, fintech West or Supertech. So we're working literally across the ecosystem. So now it's about who can really get involved in the core coalitions and drive those things forward. So as you've heard from our speakers just now about some of the types of resources they can offer, really the key questions that we're putting out there right now is one, you should really think about the level of support needed throughout the coalition and consider what kind of support you'd be willing to offer. So that you're aware, we are designing terms of reference for partners to sign in order to become part of the coalition. And this will cover off critical matters such as confidentiality, competition, and IP rights. And to be clear, any agreements that are signed are with the coalition. You're not pledging any allegiance to CFIT, you're pledging to that time-bound coalition process. But it's really important that we do this because it ensures a commitment from partners to ensure we realise our ambitions. And also a critical piece around that is that coalition partners are also more than welcome to join in the actual use case as well. They don't just have to sit at the top. They can really roll their sleeves up, get involved in those core working groups that they're passionate about as subject matter experts. And I think back to Adam's point, again, this is really about creating stuff. This isn't about just creating more reports. They have their place, they're important, but this is actually about taking a problem statement, opportunity statement, and developing a solution that works and that we can then demonstrate to everybody. This is what happens when you really mobilize the ecosystem. So with that, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. I think that's a good thing. We're going to move on to the Q&A section, and we're going to give you a chance to actually ask some questions. I'd like to welcome Sam Reardon to join me on screen. Sam is leading on our coalition work with EY. So Sam, if you can just flag yourself up. Absolute pleasure to have you. And we'll open the floor to any questions. Have there been questions added? I recognize I did say you could put some messages in the chat. Unfortunately, I've been told by my moderators that's been closed down, and just for good hygiene reasons. But if you put your hands up, and we'll get round to you. So I think Charlie, you were first, and in the background, Wasim, could you let us know if there are any questions in the Q&A? But let's allow Charlie an opportunity to speak.
Howdy, Ez. Thank you for having me and everyone else on the call. I've actually got three, I'm afraid. This is what happens when I had one halfway through and I have a couple more build up.
Charlie, it's just one question. Come on. Hit me. Let's go.
So, okay, well, the most important one. So Codec, right, we represent startups in the UK. If I'm a CEO of a fintech in the UK with limited capacity and a runway burning before my eyes, why would I get involved with CFIT?
It's a really good question. And I think the key thing here is what the barriers to your growth, right? Our mission is to help ensure that you can scale just as well as everybody else. And if there are core issues that you're facing, headwinds that you're struggling against, this is an opportunity to actually get involved and start to tackle those, right? And also to get yourself not only part of the solution, but also to be associated with the outcome of this. There will be reports that come out, and it's an opportunity to get around the table with core decision makers and stakeholders from across the entire ecosystem, whether that's government, whether that's regulation, whether it's the rest of the fintech space. And by the way, I say fintech, it's not just fintech. We say finance, innovation, technology. This covers insurance, it covers insurtech, regtech, the entire universe of this space. So I think there are plenty of great reasons to get involved, but I do appreciate that if you're time poor or resource poor, it could be difficult to get involved. But as we said, I think Adam touched on, sometimes it's about data, it might be about reporting. There are opportunities to get involved, even if you can't commit actual hard resources. Does that help? Where is he?
I'm still there. I mean, it's answered my question. Obviously, we'll see whether it has answered the questions of the folks on the call who ultimately those fintechs, right?
Absolutely. You had two other questions. What were they?
How generous of you. Well, it was by extension, how do we stop this from becoming a talking shop for big banks and consultancies? And the last one is, will CFIT be advocating for policy change?
Okay. So on the last one, very simple. We're not a lobbyist. So we're being that's part of our mandate. We can't lobby. But one of the outcomes might be that, there is a need for policy change once we've demonstrated the value of solving this particular problem. And then that is down to government and the rest of the regional associations and trade bodies to take forward. So we're here to prove the case and demonstrate what happens as opposed to actively lobby. And sorry, what was the second question? I missed that one.
How do we ensure this doesn't become
not a talking shop?
Yeah.
I think that's a great question. It's very close to my heart. I have absolutely no interest in this becoming a talking shop. Neither does Charlotte Croswell, our illustrious chair. I think we are here to ensure that we focus on delivery, and that's why we have CFIT at the top. That's why you have our coalition directors ensuring that as we go forwards, it's not just about who's the loudest voice in the room. It's not just about chasing our tails and spinning in circles. It's very clear. We're going to go through these phases. We will time box activities, and we will ensure that there is a means and a way to step forward in order to get to that final outcome. Okay? All right. I think with that, we should step on to our next question. Who else do we have?
I think Steve's next.
Yeah, it's Steve Ashworth. I've got two related questions on the consumer credit file use case. So providing consumer credit files is a regulated activity, is that participation in that work stream going to be constrained to businesses that have those relevant permissions?
That's a really good question. And I think the key thing here is that we sit at that intersection between government, regulation, and industry. It's about bringing the right players together. And as we step forward, and Sam can talk to this a little bit over the next few weeks, we start to refine those use cases, I think we'll be a lot clearer as to what that use case really looks like and wants to target, and who the key players that will be needed to solve that problem are in particular. And no, I don't think it will be restricted to those that have those permissions today. I think it will be those who want to help solve this particular problem. There may be organizations around the table that can provide that data, can provide that experience, and that's absolutely important. But we don't want to lock out those organizations that have a stake in that, who can actually help move the needle, as it were. Sam, any thoughts on that from you?
Well, I guess yeah, it's all about approach really. So we want sufficient representation from the ecosystem actively contributing in the workshops as we step through though. And as we shape up the use cases, it's absolutely important. You know, we would bring the regulators, for example, with us. We bring the industry bodies, as well as large banks, large institutions, fintechs, and technologists together. So I think it's about who you have around the table, and it's also about unconstrained thinking. So that's the thing here. We need to be able to really vision a future state that isn't constrained by current parameters and actually seeks to change the status quo. But we'd love to get you involved in that process.
Yeah, we'd love to be involved. And the reason I ask is we do have those permissions, so we're already set for that kind of area.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. Brilliant. We look forward to getting you around the table.
Thanks.
Who's next? And I am aware that we do have 2 questions in the Q&A section, but I know we've got someone with a hands up. Who do we still have?
If you let me, can you hear me, Ez?
Yeah.
Right. If you let me go first, then I've got 2 in the Q&A. 2 questions, and they kind of interact with each other as well. One from Marco, so one from Victoria. So the first one is, with coalitions, how is the activity to be financed? With academic and think tanks, funding will be a barrier for participation. That also includes any activity linked to research work.
So how are some of these activities to be financed fundamentally within the coalition? So to be clear, CFIT does have some funding available to support on these coalitions, but really with a certain few key activities, particularly around access to data, for example. And you know, we have limited funding to do this. So when we look at other activities, I think it's a question to the coalition. What can be done? What's the art of the possible? What needs to be funded? What doesn't? And then we explore that and we see where can CFIT support? Where can our industry partners support? Where there are other opportunities to get funding from that. So I appreciate that might sound like a bit of a wishy-washy answer. I'm afraid I can't come in with, say, £1 million worth of government funding to support each coalition, but CFIT does have the ability to support as and where it can. Okay.
Okay.
And what was the other question?
Yeah, follow-on question. Maybe some of it was covered by James as well, a little bit from Alan Overy, but how will market participation around IP innovation, collaboration, competition law risks be managed? Will this model be similar to ones in Asia, such as eSTAR's program and open innovation model?
So I'd love to know a bit more about the Asian models, to be frank. I don't know a huge amount about them. We're, as you heard earlier, working very closely with James from Alan Overy to figure out the actual frameworks around IP and the rest. And we're working closely with the regulators and the rest of the bodies around all the activities that we're driving forwards on at this moment in time. So if there are any specific competition issues and concerns that we need to be aware of, the idea should be that those get flagged up as we start to work through the refinement stage. So Sam, anything for you to comment on that?
Other than, yeah, we absolutely recognise there are risks to be managed within the legal frameworks, and at the moment we're thinking there will be a kind of coalition level commercial construct that governs how participants share resources, how confidentiality and competition is managed. And then we believe at a use case level there'll also need to be IP type protections and considerations. So it's being worked through, Victoria. We'd love to hear and take inspiration from other markets, and absolutely, as we start to engage legal partners, we'll build in the right mechanisms to keep us safe and to foster a good environment to collaborate.
Fantastic. I think hands up. If we go to Ricardo.
Hi, yes, thank you very much. Ricardo Tordera, Head of Policy and Government Relations at the Payments Association. I'm very happy to support the work of the CFIT on this first coalition on open finance. We have more than 180 members there, and very keen in general to share and collaborate on this agenda. My request is like on what practical terms you would need to have engagement, like what's the frequency of the work that you need to, I'm sure there will be meetings, like they're going to be online or virtual or in person, and what's the frequency, like weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and when's the start and where's the deadline?
Great question, Ricardo, and great to have you on the chat. Sam, given the work you're doing to launch this first coalition, and you're actively planning out our virtual sessions and our roadshows around the country, how about you how about you answer that one?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so to bring to life kind of the next 4 to 6 weeks, we're about to embark on 3 regional virtual sessions, 90 minutes long, focusing kind of Wales and Southwest, Scotland, North. We may also do a kind of London and South, but we're conscious of time. The idea of those sessions.
Just to mention on that, FinTech Northern Ireland are going to get involved in the activity in Edinburgh as well. So just to be clear.
Yeah, there's some fantastic teaming actually as we start to think about regions coming together. So we'll run a series of virtual workshops. They will be to refine the use cases. There'll be a 90-minute commitment. So if anyone is interested in joining those, we did look for expressions of interest through the survey, but equally you can reach out afterwards via either emailing myself or the CFIT mailbox. Then as we refine those use cases and get deeper on the detail around exactly what we think we're solving for, the objectives, equally the members and the data sets we think we'll need to solve for it, we'll then be working across the end of June and do a number of showcase events back in those regions face to face to really ramp up the level of excitement and commitment. Again, options to join those, and please do express as we come out with those events to join. I guess the parallel track is the partner commitment. So that is the deeper level coalition membership, and that is a more involved role, and that has a responsibility around resources and also the steering of the overarching coalition on open finance. So that role, I imagine, would meet on a cadence. It may need to be fortnightly to start with, considering the pace of delivery and change and the 6-month horizon we're working towards. And actually the use cases I could see being even more committed. So working at a use case level, I could see people in rooms together workshopping on a very frequent basis. So I guess more to come as we establish in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
Ricardo.
Fantastic. Okay, Adrian, I think you're up next. Adrian Field.
Hi there, it's Adrian from OneID. So here's another question related to IP. So I work on some global open standards, and typically, you donate the IP, and that's owned by the Open Standards Publishing Body. Will the kind of commercial discussions around, sounds like the coalition might be like a time-bound JV, joint venture, that owns the IP. How are you going to manage that structure and the commercialization of that, so as you don't slow down the innovation?
That's a really important question, and it's something we're actively exploring at the moment. I think James from Alan Overy has actually got his hand up, so we can bring him on potentially to start discussing some of those thoughts and ideas. We are following models that have been implemented by organisations such as the Green Finance Institute in the past. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, I can assure you of that. So as we move forward, we're trying to use and ensure that we're leveraging well-established approaches to these things, I think, to answer some of those exact challenges that you've raised, because obviously there will be IP produced, and it's important that everyone has access to that in a fair and equitable way. So maybe at this point we bring James on. I know you're third in the queue, but I think it'd be good just to hear from you briefly on that point.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I could put together, but specifically on that one, it goes back to what I said earlier. At the end of the day, we've got to make sure that the rules and regulations match the purpose and the intended output. So this is obviously the very beginning, and we need to think through that. But the plan is to put in place a structure, and then obviously to explain the structure and to explain the background to it. So people come into the structure knowing, and I mentioned the word fair earlier. So people come in feeling it's fair, and it is. There's a bit of give and take here. There's a bargain being struck. Now, you're asking for people's time and contribution to something, but if it all works well, the output is more opportunity and a more vibrant ecosystem in which we're operating. So that's the bargain, and the legal construct needs to match it, not the other way around. And that was the other point I was originally coming in on. It was a very good question earlier on, and notwithstanding the way I probably sound, and the city, but the city is struggling with its image, and it's struggling with how it can help facilitate some government and policy objectives, including levelling up, including the city being seen as an enabler rather than some white citadel beyond the reach of most people. And the role of everybody in this, and a lot of people are now talking the same language, including those outside of London, and the participation is important. So yes, there's a danger that you get people who sound like me who want to talk about themselves, but at the same time, this is not going to work unless there's a broader engagement. And I think the role and the this is the time to speak. You know, if there is a voice there, everybody has a voice. Government policymakers are all alert to that and are ready to listen. So I think I would not only see CFIT as an opportunity. Look, I haven't discussed this with Ez, so he can tell me if I'm talking rubbish. But this is not only an opportunity to contribute something, but it's an opportunity to be heard, and for problems that people are experiencing in their implementation of their models, for those problems to be captured and to be articulated back to people who put in place these rules.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, James. I think that's a really solid answer. I think we've got, apologies if I pronounce your name wrong, Nilixa.
Then we need to unmute Nilixa.
Friday afternoon, isn't it? Apologies. So, Nilixa,
did I pronounce your name correctly just before
you
we
did?
start?
Yes, you did.
Fantastic. Thank you. My name's been mispronounced so many times. But
you and I are familiar with that, so it's not something I'll be honest, I'm fine. I'm not precious about it. But you did it very well. Thank you very much. So, Nilixa Vlukia, Open Finance Association. So, as you appreciate, your first coalition is a matter very, very close to our hearts. You've given an outline of some of the commitments, and obviously we'd be interested in discussing with you that in greater detail. From the timeline that was outlined by Sam, I have a question. Does it mean that you're looking for partner commitment sort of sometime, a firm commitment where you're signed on the dotted line, so to speak, sometime before the end of June? And the reason, and there's two reasons for that. One is, would you be looking, say, for an organisation like ours to commit at the industry body level, the OFA, or are you looking for commitment from our individual members? And the reason I'm asked that question is because you're probably aware that as an industry, we are also have the benefit now of the JROC report on open banking. And from a membership perspective, although the timing of this and the fact it's happening is fantastic, the timing of this is also, you know, slap bang car crashing into the work being proposed by the JROC report as well, and the stringent timelines they have there.
So you're aware, we're very close to the JROC team and the open banking team. I had a conversation with the open banking team just last week. We know Sheldon Mills at the FCA very well. Brian Zhang, spoken to him a number of times. So they're very well aware of what we're doing at the moment. And you're right, there are some tight timelines here. So firstly, to answer your first question, and I think it's mirrored in the Q&A, yes, from a partner perspective for Coalition 1, and bear in mind, there will be further coalitions, right? You know, we are funded to run multiple coalitions. one coalition at a time, but there will be another coalition once this one ends. We haven't decided on that subject matter yet. But before this coalition starts at the end of June, we do want those commitments locked down. And that's important so that the coalition itself has what it needs to be able to action and execute over such a compressed timeline. In regards to whether we want those resources from you or your members, I mean, we're open to resources from everybody, right? You know, we want as many people to be able to get involved as possible, whether it's at an industry body level or whether it's at a SME level, whether it's at an enterprise level, whether it's government. We want organizations to feel free that they can get involved. Now, you have a very large membership body, so if they're all busy doing open banking work, totally get that, right? There's something we want. We want to mobilize the ecosystem. We want you all involved, but we're not here to force anyone to get involved, okay? So I don't want people to feel that there is an ask here, which is you must get involved. But I'd stress, and as James said, there's a huge amount of value in getting involved in this and being able to really make that change and unblocking those core barriers, enabling that we hit those core goalposts of more trade, more jobs, more inclusion by solving some of the barriers to growth and scaling for UK fintech, solving some of those core problems that we see with our consumers and SMEs. I think there's value in that.
Sure. I mean, I absolutely appreciate there's no compulsion here, and the challenge is all on our side because both of those topics are obviously the key priorities for our entire membership base.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
you know, but the timing point is helpful, that confirmation.
And I completely appreciate that we're working on massively compressed timelines, right? We're here to move things forward, to get things done, and there's nothing quite like a deadline to focus the minds. So with that, I look forward to any cooperation you and your members can provide going forwards, Nelixa.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Tanika.
Hi, I'm Tanika. I'm from the British Business Bank, and thank you for that presentation. It was really helpful. I will definitely take that away, and we'll have a think about how we can support as the bank. My question, I think Sam and James both briefly touched on it, was about the regional steering groups and exactly how the relationship will work between those and the kind of core development of the use case. I think we already have some of our UK network who are regionally focused involved in the regional steering groups, which is great, but just trying to figure out exactly how those two things will kind of coincide.
So before I'll get Sam to speak to that, but just one thing I want to stress, and thank you for the question, Tanika, is that CFIT is a national body, right? We are not London, we are across the country, and that's why it's been so important for us to engage all of the regions. I think, Sam, you can probably speak more to how those use cases will actually interact with the steering committee.
Yeah, exactly. So we envisage for the duration of the Open Finance Coalition, which let's say is a time-bound thing, let's say it's 6 months, that steering committee will come together and operate to provide resources and decision-making support for the use cases. Below that, we'll have a use case working group. We imagine that will be a regional champion. So let's just say Scotland then will take forward a particular use case you've identified, and that will have a cross-section of resources. They will make requests of that steering that coalition steerco. They will provide updates to that steerco, but equally locally they will manage progress. So they will be driving forward the progress. There'll be passionate people that want to move that forward. And that's kind of how we see them operating. So there is kind of a governance decision-making layer through the coalition, and then local use cases driving forward the work, the actual delivery, the tangible outcomes, the progress, the prototypes, and we see them interacting in that way. We don't want to make this overly bureaucratic. We want agility in the operating model, and we want self-organization at the regional working group level as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I will check in with my colleagues who are already speaking at a regional level just to make sure we're all looped up then.
Perfect.
Brilliant. We're really right up against it. I do want to respect everyone's time, but I will just very quickly whip through a couple more questions. Louise, Great to have you. Great to see your hand up. I know you've asked a question in the Q&A. Do you want to quickly fire that up? Is Louise Beaumont still there? Have we lost Louise? All right, maybe Simon Hardy very quickly.
Yeah, I think it's now on.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah, we can
hi,
hear you.
Louise. Hello.
Hi there. I had a question about what do we feel we're missing in terms of resource
That's a great question.
from the partners.
From the partners. I think it's still early for us to be concrete on that. I think you've heard some of the types of resources that our partners are looking to supply. So we've seen legal, we've seen tech, we've seen software as well. I think, look, there's a whole range of aspects. We want product developers, we want designers, we want researchers and analysts. And I think that's going to be a really important aspect to this that tends to get forgotten about. We're going to need testers. We're going to need opportunities to actually run these things in, say, sandboxes and the rest. How do we prove the use cases have value? We're going to need organizations that have expertise in actually applying some of these types of use cases. Let's look at the credit file example. So how do we actually prove that out? So what type of organizations have the skills and the resources available to demonstrate that? So I think it's still pretty open question. And as Sam and the rest of the team run our virtual sessions and our regional sessions over the next few weeks, I think we'll start to home in on that one. But, you know, I'd love to stay in touch on that question, Louise, if there's anything specifically that you're interested in committing, and we can look at what we could get as we move forwards. Thank you. Simon, very quick one from you.
Oops. Hi, yeah, thanks, Ez. I think James mentioned something about the sort of the focus of the image of the sort of city, the image problem. I think you referred to it. And I imagine that you mean that externally as much as nationally. Perhaps more interestingly, though, it strikes me that you have lots of opportunity to accelerate the ecosystem itself, once these coalitions have delivered. So I just wondered whether what the thinking was in the sense of ecosystem sort of startup acceleration once those coalitions have delivered their outputs, and where you're at with that.
And so I think that's a really good question. I think they've all been fantastic questions today, but that's probably rather existential one. It's what happens next, right? Once a coalition is completed, once a use case has been demonstrably proven, there's a report, there's a prototype, what happens next, right? And I think that's something we're still focused on. I'm very keen that any outcomes from these are actually taken forward by industry, by government, may even be by academia. We might see a few spin-outs who decide to take some of these solutions and go, you know what, this is a great thing that we can build out. It might be that some of the fintechs and startups go, we want to adopt this. It might be that government goes, we think this is a great idea, we want to fund this. It might be that the regions that we work with go, love what you did, love the output. We want to work with some of the key delivery partners and actually push this forwards. So there are many potential solutions and outcomes to that. I can't pretend to predict exactly how that will play out at this moment. I think that's something that we'll see as we go forwards. So I hope that helps, Simon.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot.
Brilliant. And I think with that, I'm going to have to wrap it up because we are over time. I do want to respect everyone's time. There was a question by Nick Davies. Great to see you, Nick, about not being a lobbying group. Absolutely. We are going to be looking at public-private sector use cases, especially around vulnerability. That's something we're looking to build in as we look forward. So we'll see how the use cases start to narrow down, but that's an area of very strong focus for us. So firstly, I'd just like to say a big thank you to you all for giving us your time and listening to us speak for the last hour and 4 minutes. Please do consider what kind of role you'd like to play as you go forwards. And as you can see, if you are interested, please do email us if you haven't, or if you have, please follow up. The survey is still open. I know we said we were closing it, but we've had such great response. We felt we'll keep the survey open and allow people to continue to contribute to that data as we go forwards and close up our use cases. So I think with that, all I can say is it's been a pleasure, really excited about what we're doing and cannot wait to see what comes out of this first coalition. So have a great weekend and we'll speak soon.